Okay, here we are, Lecture 7, Domestic Ideology or the Ideology of Separate Spheres. And this is going to go more in depth into a concept that you should have remembered from the first set of lectures on the Victorian period, the public and the private, the ideology of separate spheres. This ideology encapsulates the idea that a woman's place is in the home. And here I have a quotation from Alfred Tennyson's epic poem, well, not semi-epic, not totally epic, I take it back, incredibly long poem. The Princess, man for the field and woman for the hearth, man for the sword and for the needle she, man with the head and woman with the heart, man to command and woman to obey, all else confusion. This is not a settled poem. This is not a settled point, right? This is the idea. Men have one set of qualities, women have another set of good qualities. They complement each other, but they have these very specific roles that both need to play. Right? This is a very specific, very rigid gender roles. Why is this? Why do we have this idea that men need to have these kinds of roles and women need to have these kind of roles? This other quotation from Sarah Stickney Ellis, this is a book of domestic conduct, but it's basically an advice book telling women of England how they should act. I'm not going to read this whole thing. You can read it. But basically she's explaining that women need to stay in the home, women need to create a lovely home, because when men come home from work, the world outside the home is so full of temptation to do immoral things, or to act selfishly, or to act aggressively, or to act without integrity, that men need to come home because men need to come home and rest and relax there so women can make them more moral. It's kind of women's job to provide men with a kind of morality and a kind of civility that will help them get through the temptations of the public sphere. So women, right, the language here, monitress, a person who monitors your character, guarding the fireside comforts, her moral beauty will keep him a better man. This idea, women make men more moral. And they do that through staying in the home and being this kind of lovely domestic. Another version of this idea, a very popular poem, incredibly long poem from the 19th century, The Angel in the House. And this talks a little bit about, okay, let's say you are the angel in the house. Let's say you're doing everything that you can, right? She's doing her best, but he's still, an icicle. He is impatient with her. He's not necessarily a good man. Doesn't matter, right? She still thinks, right? She seems to think the sin was hers. She's still his wife. She's devoted to him. She loves with a love that cannot tire. Even if he doesn't love her back, her love gets higher and higher and higher. This idea that there's this kind of unconditional love, wifely love, that this is woman's duty. Even if this poem suggests it's still your job to do this, even if you're not necessarily the man in this poem is not being improved, right? He's not becoming more moral. This is a painting that illustrates this. It's by the last name of the painter is Hicks, and it's a painting called Woman's Mission, Companion to Manhood. And here we see the woman at her job. The man here, who's very tall, like this nice, lovely column, has received, this is a letter informing him somebody has died. You can tell from the black border. So he's received very bad news. Someone he knows has died. He's clearly upset. What is she doing? What all women do. She's comforting him, right? And she's also hanging on him, right? Although she's physically weak, she's hanging on him, but she's also comforting him emotionally, right? Women, this completely fits into these ideas of gender roles. Women do not do the physical work, they do the emotional work. Although we can tell from this room that she is a good wife, right? Look, fresh flowers in the vase, a lovely tea, like this looks like breakfast, they're having breakfast together, right? She's providing a nice home. She's making it nice for him. So, now, these ideas of gender roles are very rigid. And I'm sure that many of you think that, maybe today things are different. We don't expect women to stay in the home. However, this idea that women do the emotional work in the relationship and that this kind of emotional work makes men better, that women civilize men, women make men into better people, that is an idea I would suggest. Next picture. If you guys recognize this story, and I'm sure many of you saw this movie as children, very popular movie, very popular idea. Yes, women make men better. Women civilize men. He's a beast. Even think about the porridge eating scene, right? She gets him to kind of clean up. She gets him to be nicer, to control his temper, be polite. That is the job that women do. So this is a very familiar idea to us, but it's a very familiar idea to the victim. And so laid back again, going back to this idea of these two spheres, the public sphere for men, the private sphere for women. Men get to go back and forth between the public and the private sphere. Women really only inhabit the private sphere. It's a very different world, and lots of, if you think about the world of work, the economy, the marketplace, government, politics, women were not allowed to vote, much less become members of parliament, etc., etc. Schooling, if you were sent away to boarding school, it was a single-sex school. And while there were some boarding schools for women, this was much more a thing for boys than for girls. Most girls would be educated privately at home, perhaps with a governess. But I also want to point out this is true, this public sphere, private sphere separation is true only for the middle class and for the wealthy. Working class women had to work. They didn't have the luxury of staying at home or not being allowed to work. So this is really, we get these increasing gender distinctions, these more rigid gender roles with the rise of the middle class, because the middle class can afford this kind of lifestyle, this kind of separation. And why am I going into all of this with preparing you for Goblin Market? Think about this and think about the readings on sexuality that I gave you, and think about how sexuality gets laid over this gender divide. Men are active. Men do the work. Women stay at home and make men more moral. Women are private. What does it mean to go into the public sphere? What does it mean to face different kinds of temptation? Not just sexual temptation, but different kinds of temptation. Think about those things. Think about those roles in Goblin Market. Do we see a public sphere in Goblin Market? Do we see temptation? What is the temptation? And how these rigid gender roles might also be expressed in terms of sexuality. Who gets to express their sexuality or experience sexuality, and who doesn't? The idea that women are devoted to the home and women are devoted to the family, and you have to love and obey this husband even if he's not necessarily very nice to you. Think about how those things get played out or played with in Goblin Market. Okay, great. This is lecture number 7. I'll see you guys in class.